Blog Talk Radio. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Medlock Post radio show. This is where we educate, entertain, enlighten, and empower. The views and opinions on the Medlock Post radio show are those of the host and guests. They are not necessarily the views and opinions of Blog Talk Radio, Spreaker.com, its corporations, affiliates, or any other podcast streaming services. Thank you for joining the show today, and here is your host, Richard G. Medlock.
Ladies and gentlemen, on this Saturday morning, October 1st, 2022. Yes, Saturday morning. We could not broadcast yesterday because our Wi-Fi was in and out. Our internet connections were not stable enough to try to execute a program. But this morning, everything's operating well and good. We are keeping our fingers crossed. And again, Hurricane Ian has just caused devastation throughout Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia. The coast, the whole coast of South Carolina was devastated. And of course, that's my home state. I live in the upstate. We were away from it. We had a lot of winds, not as much rain as they said we would, but a lot of winds took down trees and power lines and other damage. But the people on the coast of South Carolina, North Carolina, but I've talked to friends in Charleston, relatives in Charleston and Myrtle Beach and that area and the Grand Strand, and it's just devastating. One of them sent me a video from the TV station down there on the boardwalk at Myrtle Beach. It's gone. The boardwalk is gone. And that was a favorite spot for locals and tourists. So it's this hurricane, what it did in Florida and now in other states, a lot of work needs to be done to help recover and recoup and rebuild. And your donations are greatly appreciated. There's a Florida Relief Fund.org that you can go directly to Florida, or you can go to the American Red Cross, redcross.org, and donate there, or to some others, Catholic Services, Latter-day Saint charities, Samaritan's Purse. They're all going to be involved, or you can do it through your churches. And I'm sure a lot of people are organizing right now. As a matter of fact, I know we are, to send crews now down to the coastal Carolina, and instead of Florida. So we'll be cleaning up the mess here instead of being able to send stuff and people down to Florida. So it's going to be a struggle, and it's going to affect our economy, and we'll get into that a little bit. This is Richard G. Medlock, your host on the Medlock Post Radio Show. We're in a new month, October, beginning of the last quarter of the month. And yes, on Thursday, the Senate passed a continuing resolution, and Friday, the House passed it, and Biden signed it, so the government wouldn't have to shut down. And what can I say, folks? This is business as usual. We're going to get into that more than a little bit today. This is episode 60, Renewing American Purpose. Renewing American Purpose. And what is happening in Washington, D.C. does not fall into the American purpose. It does not. Government of the people, by the people, and for the people, or government of the connected, by the connected, or for the connected. If you had to choose which one was happening right now, which would it be? A or B? Government of the people or government of the connected? Hold your answer till later, and you'll know what the correct answer is for today. Let's talk about the economy. Market was down 500 points yesterday. Dow Jones. Others were down big too. Late in the day, the market struggled all day, didn't know which way to go, and then boom, it just dropped. Not because of the hurricane, but because of the economy, because more reports kept coming out. The Chicago Producer Price Index, the PMI, the Manufacturing Index, for September of this year dropped to 45.7. Now, folks, these indexes have a line, and 50, that number 50 is the line. Above it is growth. Below it is contraction. So in August, the PMI was 52.2. It dropped to 45.7. 7.5 points in 1 month. It's a big drop. But let's go a year ago. Yeah, let's jump a year from now. Let's see what's going on. A year ago, the PMI was 66.8. Today, it's 45.7. That is a 31.6% drop in a year. 1/3 of the manufacturing has stopped. That's why the market was down yesterday. We are in a recession, folks. And it's going to get worse. Everybody is saying 2023 is going to be worse than 2022. And they also confirmed, well, that was on Thursday, that the first and second quarter GDPs were negative. So in a recession. Now, another thing, inflation in August was stronger than expected, despite the Federal Reserve's efforts to bring down prices. Now, they were shocked. No, we've done all this stuff. We've raised rates. The Fed is still pumping money into the economy, into the system. They need to stop that. They need to be taking money out. What they're doing by raising rates is they're shutting down the economy. Not bringing down prices, they're shutting it down. I told you about my banker 3 weeks ago. Talked to him, and he said he's a commercial banker, lender. He says, guys, people are already stopping. They're putting projects on hold because rates have gone up. He says if they go up another point or so, he says some of these people are shutting down. Well, the rates have went up since he and I talked, 75 basis points. So if I were to talk to him today, he'd probably say, yeah, I've had some more projects be put on hold. They're shutting the economy down instead of helping it. All right. So the personal consumption expenditures price index, this is what they call the core index, excluding food and energy. And food is still skyrocketing, folks. You know that. I know that. It rose 0.6% for the month after being flat in July. Remember in July, Joe Biden came out and says, we have zero inflation because it was flat. He said, oh, we have zero inflation. We're done. We're fixed. All is good in the world. Forked tongue. So we're looking at growth that is hurting Americans, or we're looking at policies that are hurting Americans. We can show everything that's causing this downturn, that's causing inflation, that's causing businesses to shut down or to slow down or let people off, is from policies from the United States government. This new corporate competition act, this competition group that they put together in the White House, mandate this, mandate that, more regulations here, more regulations there. One of the things it talked about was there's 4 major meat producers, and then you have all these little guys. Well, they want to make it equal. They want to make everybody equal in the meat industry and other industries. That was just one that they brought up. Well, let me ask you this. These little guys have a purpose in the market. They don't want to be big like the big boys. Yeah, they want to grow, but they don't want to become humongous. They don't want to be a public corporation. You know how much money that costs? Your attorney's fees and all your accounting fees and filings and all that stuff. To go public, it costs a ton of money. Well, these little guys, these I say little compared to the big boys, there's a market in America for all these little companies. Most of the companies in America are under 500 employees. But the government wants to squash them. So this is what we're looking at, economy. And then you see housing just getting beaten to death right now. Home sales are down. You have 2 months in a row, 15% plus walk away from contracts because all of a sudden mortgage rates went up. They're at 6.7%. And all of a sudden these people can't afford the mortgage payment. So the housing, the builders are getting beat to death, and it's all due to government regulations. Alrighty. So let me play this little public service announcement about Just Serve.
Would you like to help out in your community? Do you want to serve those in need but don't know where to go or where to look? Now it's easy. Go to justserve.org, a free website dedicated to helping those who want to serve find opportunities in their area. Just Serve has teamed up with faith, government, and nonprofit organizations nationwide to post needs and opportunities to serve. Go to justserve.org and type in your city, and you'll see a list of upcoming service opportunities near you. Each one gives you all the information you need, like when and where the event takes place, as well as who to contact to volunteer. You can even sign up on Just Serve to receive emails letting you know about new projects around you. Just Serve is a fast, free, and easy way for you to find ways to serve. You can make a difference, and Just Serve is here to help. JustServe.org is provided as a service by The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Okay, JustServe.org. Just go there wherever you are, put in your zip code, and you'll see all kinds of service projects. And there's going to be bunches in several states, especially Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia. We're going to get into this climate crisis thing later, but I have a question for you, ladies and gentlemen. If men are from Mars and women are from Venus, where are all the other genders from? Yeah, don't laugh. Well, yeah, we can laugh. I mean, that's how stupid this is. If men are from Mars and women are from Venus, where's all the other genders from? Somebody please help us out there. I'm trying to get a grasp on this, folks. It's kind of crazy, isn't it? All right, renewing American purpose. This is from September 29th this year. And this was a talk given by Russell Voigt, V-O-U-G-H-T, of the American Mind, the Claremont Institute. The AmericanMind.com is something that you need to be following now. They're part of the Claremont Institute, which is a conservative think tank. There's some deep thinkers up there. They put out some stuff every now and then. I have to just study it to truly understand it. I only had to read Russell Voigt once to understand exactly what he's talking about here, renewing American purpose. His subtitle on this, Statesmanship in a Post-Constitutional Moment. Now, I will post this on on medlockpost.blogspot.com after the program, sometime after the program, but it will be up today. And you can read it, or go to the American Mind and type in Russell Vogt, V-O-U-G-H-T, Voigt. I'm sorry. Well, let's get into this. This puts a lot of things into perspective, and it also reiterates a lot of things that we have educated you on the Medlock Post. Mr. Voigt, Whittaker Chambers once said that one of the most important cravings in the modern world is height. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, height. The ability to get up and see the lay of the land above the various forces of history moving us when we don't know we are being moved. This talk is an attempt to gain some constitutional height about where we are as citizens. So this talk is addressed to and about we the people. We the people. That's who he's talking to here. Back to him. We are in a post-constitutional moment in our country. Our constitutional institutions, understandings, and practices have all been transformed over decades away from the words on the paper into a new arrangement, a new regime, if you will, that pays only lip service to the old Constitution. You and I know that this has been going on as long as we can remember. The Constitution is attacked. It's been poo-pooed. It's been called out of date, etc. Continuing. Our system is now much more like an unwritten constitution, which operates based on precedents, like the English system. No constitutional amendments have been passed to enact this, but new legal paradigms have been introduced, a living constitution, independent agencies, permanent, expert civil servants that have changed the underlying separation of powers at the core of our system. Continuing. How did this come to be? The left at the turn of the 19th century were loud critics of the Constitution. Woodrow Wilson wanted an efficient, modern administration state run by experts that could not be slowed by the Constitution's separation of powers. He complained that the trouble with the theory of checks and balances is that government is not a machine, but a living thing. No living thing can have its organs offset against each other as checks and live. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Woodrow Wilson was what they call a progressive. He had Marxists in his administration. And I'm trying to think of the guy's name. Is it Story? I'll have to look it up. But Woodrow Wilson's big person that advised him on everything was a Marxist, an avowed Marxist. And I've talked about that in previous shows. But comparing the Constitution to the organs in our body, seriously? The Constitution, but let me go on with him. But these complaints largely stopped during the historical developments of the 20th century. And there is rarely any talk of the constitutional amendment on the left. Why is that? Because the left quietly adopted a strategy of institutional change that left the constitutional system of separate powers in place, but radically perverted how they operated, their incentive structures, and their responsiveness to the American people. Do you see what they've done? We call it the administrative state, and he gets in there and calls it that. The administrative state that Woodrow Wilson wanted developed, which is now strongly developed, is there, and it's operating underneath the scope. Back to Mr. Voigt. The left's legal theorists adopted an approach to interpreting the Constitution based on it being a living document, meaning that its provisions should be understood to be malleable, keeping up with a modernizing nation. Now, folks, let me stop right there and explain this. When the Constitution was written, of course, there were no modern machines. There were no automobiles. There were no jet engines. There were no nuclear weapons. There were no AR-15s. Society wasn't as big then. Communications was slow mail. You'd write a letter and some guy on horseback takes it somewhere. Yeah, things have changed. However, the Constitution was meant to survive because of the principles and values in the Constitution. The outline of how a government should work. whether it's in 1787 or in 2022. What has happened is the left has tried to change the principles and values. And they understand how the Constitution limits them. And that's why Woodrow Wilson understood that, and he developed this underneath government of unelected officials that really make the decisions. But the Constitution is about principles and values, and that's what we need to be fighting for. Human nature really hasn't changed. You still have the good guys and the bad guys. And when this country was founded, before, I'm going to hold that thought. Back to the article. The provision should be understood to be malleable, keeping up with a modernizing nation. This was married with increased power assumed by courts, and the notion that 9 Supreme Court justices would make all final decisions without any response from the other branches. And understand, the courts only give opinions. The Supreme Court only gives an opinion. Legislators can change it. They can adjust the law that was just ruled on. The great example of that is the Dobbs ruling, the abortion ruling, Roe versus Wade. What did the Supreme Court say? That right is not in the United States Constitution. However, states under Amendment 10 have the right to decide on their own. And that's the way it should have been decided in the first place. But the federal government yanked it out of Texas and took it over using the Commerce Clause. If you can, and nobody still understands that today. So they want the justices to be legislators, and they've turned into that. Radical judicialism. All right, Congress created so-called independent agencies, such as the Federal Reserve or the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, meant to be independent from the direction of an elected president. But this principle impacted all the agencies, with career civil servants protected from at-will employment. That means they can't be fired. Now, let me ask you, how many federal government agencies are out there? Does anybody have a clue? I don't. You have an agency and sub-agencies and sub-agencies and sub-sub-agencies, and you have 2 or 3 different agencies, and they're doing the same thing. This is what Donald Trump was talking about. We need to rein all this in. But he was fighting the people that he was trying to rein in. Why do you think they went after him so hard and still go after him so hard today? He was not part of this. He knew all about it, and he wanted to stop it. They will do everything in their power to destroy that man and everything around him and everybody. Continuing with Mr. Voigt. This is a great article. You need to look it up and study it. Personnel in policy. We see this now with the notion that the Department of Justice and the FBI are meant to be independent from a president's priorities. The Centers for Disease Control only has a handful of policy officials appointed by a president. The rest, thousands, are all career officials, making it utterly impossible to manage even in normal times, let alone a pandemic. And folks, that was proven. Back to this. And Congress increasingly delegated its authority to make law to the executive branch, evading the responsibility to their voters to make democratic trade-offs, empowering experts to provide input, but also retaining control at the upper echelons of Congress. congressional leadership, committee chairmen, or senators who can block nominees to put their thumbs on the scale toward their preferred policy approach. You understand that? One person can stop a bill or stop somebody from being nominated or even being voted on. See, that's wrong. Congress should have to vote. That it needs to go back to the American purpose, the purpose of the Constitution, and carry out its duties. For example, back to the article. In the Trump administration, there were titanic struggles involving 3 or 4 different cabinet departments with a constant parade of participating senators over determining the right blend of ethanol and gasoline, pitting ethanol producers against oil refiners. You guys remember that, right? Yeah, corn versus oil. Making law away from the floor of the House and Senate because that is what we were mandated to faithfully execute. This is what they say in these agencies. We have a mandate. No, you don't. That's what the Supreme Court ruled back in June with the EPA. You don't have the authority to do this. There's nothing defined in your outline that gives you the authority. But Congress put in there that the director of this agency can change regulations, make rulings, as necessary. The court said it has to be specific, it has to be passed by Congress to give them authority. Congress just passed this off to the administrative state and says, go do what you want to do, leave us alone, and we don't have to be blamed for all that happens. But they're being blamed big time now. Back to the article. All of this so far is fairly well known, but it gets more complicated the more you study and experience it. And that's what we've been asking you over and over. Look under the surface, folks. The surface at things. Don't take anything for face value. I don't care what it is. Whether it's the government or you're reading a history book or even the Bible, study it. What does this passage mean? What's the principle and values in this passage? Maybe that's a question we need to be asking our congressmen and our senators. What's the principle and the values in this bill you're trying to pass? Where are the principles and values in this bill, in this new tax, in these new regulations? Where's the principle and values to we the people? Where is it? That's a great question, folks. Back to the article. Michael Glennon has done us a service by pointing to the concept of double government or administrative government and the work of Walter Beget, who Wilson certainly drew on, in describing how the English constitutional system developed from the monarchy holding most power to it holding virtually none. Beget was late 1800s, 1880s. Beget drew a distinction between what he called the dignified institutions, the monarchy and the House of Lords, that needed to retain its emotional hold on the public through its history and theater, efficient institutions such as the House of Commons and the Cabinet, where real power resides. Now, Thomas Jefferson called this the artificial aristocracy, the dignified institutions, the monarchy, a artificial aristocracy. It was a bloodline, or it's money that puts you there. And then the efficient institution he called the authentic aristocracy, because of the people, of their virtue and their morals. They were elected into office to represent the people. So they were authentic representatives of the people. So Voigt here is using different terms, but the same meaning. And I guess he didn't want to use aristocracy because that would refer to other countries. So here he's talking efficient institutions and dignified institutions. Well, is it safe to say that in America today that the White House is a dignified institution, if you can call what's going on there dignified anymore? Is that what he's talking about? They're there. They're the figurehead, and he goes out and mumbles and stumbles. And then the efficient institutions are the federal agencies. You got the picture now? They're the ones doing the work. They're the ones making the decisions. They're the ones making up all of this stuff. And they send it to Congress, and Congress, yeah, we'll pass it. Going back to the article. Glennon writes that in our system, the same phenomenon has developed. Together, these institutions make up a disguised republic that obscures the massive shift in power that has occurred, which, if wholly understood, would create a crisis in public confidence. Remember I said, look under the sheets, folks, look under the sheets. Look underneath the surface. And that's what he's saying here. This Michael Glennon, we have a disguised republic that holds the power, and if the public understood that, it would be a crisis, a public crisis. I think a lot of people are starting to understand this more and more and more and more. Even especially in education. These school boards that are being attacked by parents after the parents found out what they're teaching in school. And the Department of Justice has declared those parents domestic terrorists, and they're going after them. And school boards are suing them and getting injunctions so those parents can't come back and talk at a meeting. That's Marxism, folks. Going back to the article about a crisis of public confidence. I don't think anybody has confidence in the federal government anymore anyway. This crisis has been averted because the efficient institutions have been careful to hide where they begin and where the dignified institutions end. So the under the surface, the disguised republic under the surface knows where to draw that line and put it back on the surface to those dignified institutions, Congress, the White House, and the courts. Picture, folks? This is what's laying out there in America. This promotes continued public deference to the efficient institutions' decisions and continued belief that the dignified institutions retain real power. Sorry, folks. I had to sneeze. And did I lose my paper? No. Okay. Let me read that last one. I was trying to hold back the sneeze. I did mute myself, I hope. This promotes continued public deference to the efficient institutions, the disguised republic, and continued belief that the dignified institutions retain real power. We think Congress and the White House has power. Do you understand? They don't make decisions for we the people. They make decisions for the lobbyists that pay them, from the corporations, from around the world, from even other countries that pay them, and from other entities and their own personal interest. This is how they make decisions. And add to that their overwhelming desire of greed and power. This is what drives them. Not what's good for America, what's good for them. Washington, D.C. is totally divorced from America. Back to the article. This is double government and describes what we have in the United States. The president and the vast supermajority of the House and Senate are the dignified in our system, and the congressional leadership, the committee barons, I like that word, committee barons, and the entirety of the administrative state are the efficient. These committee barons. What popped into your mind right off the bat? That's right, the January 6th committee. Totally unconstitutional, totally off the books. And who set that up? Well, Pelosi set that up. Again, to destroy Trump and those that support him. Mr. Voigt continues, grasping the center. What makes it so hard to discern is that the center of gravity of power is spread over the lines of demarcation, separating the branches themselves within the Constitution. Yes, power has been delegated to the executive, but the president and the executive branch are no longer quite the same thing in practice. The agencies care more about the congressional appropriations committees than they do about their president. They draft rules according to the authorizing committee's interest, and they are all influenced by the values and milieu of a permanent ruling class in a capital city, divorced from the everyday concerns and wishes of the American people themselves. Just reiterating what I just said. They're divorced from us on purpose. They do not want anything to do with you and I. This is the new Constitution. It has been a slow-moving revolution for over 100 years. But the Constitution we live under is not the one that our founders gave us, and the left understands this. They know this. They just never say the quiet part out loud. Have you ever wondered why their justices or legislatures never get hung up on whether the Constitution allows their preferred policy or strategic approach? Great question, right? They don't get hung up with that, but they did get hung up in May and June when the 5 justices on the Supreme Court, and in some cases 6, ruled for the Constitution. They went bonkers. They're still going bonkers because they're sitting there going, we're losing power. We're on the wrong side now. But they don't care right now because they have the administrative state in the efficient people sitting there in total control. It's not that they just give lip service to the one, but it's because they understand and live and swear allegiance to the new one. Anything they want to do is just new precedent. a living Constitution. Oh, this is new precedent. How many times have we heard that in Supreme Court decisions? Oh, this is new precedent. Whereas conservatives find themselves interpreting a revered document that is no longer in effect, lacking the tools to save their country, and therefore conserving not the Constitution, but the new regime. It's like a marriage that ended over 2 decades ago, in which one party didn't tell the other, and the other still thinks the marriage is in effect and operates as such. At some point, reality needs to set in. And reality has set in with a lot of we the people. That's me talking. The reality, because of inflation, because of your income is losing pace with inflation, even though you're getting pay raises, you're still behind inflation. So we ask the question, where do we go from here? Part of the answer is to become radical constitutionalist. Amen. Your power of we the people comes from understanding the Constitution and its principles and values. That's our power. Continuing, what I mean by this is the founders designed our system for a titanic struggle between the branches horizontally and between the states and the federal government vertically. They gave us a separation of powers which we absolutely they gave us a separation of powers which was absolutely essential to protect our freedoms and way of life. In fact, James Madison wrote that, quote, the accumulation of all powers, legislative, executive, and judicial, in the same hands, whether hereditary, self-appointed, or elected, may justly be pronounced the very definition of tyranny, unquote. And I've quoted that before on this program. And it's from the Federalist paper. It's either 48 or 49. Can't remember off the top of my head. It's 48 or 49. Continuing, and the way to prevent such an accumulation was to give each branch, quote, the necessary constitutional means and personal motives to resist encroachments of the others. Ambition must be made to counteract ambition. The interest of the man must be connected with the constitutional rights of the place, unquote. The branches had a healthy fear of each other. It caused them to pause before encroaching. This is what I was talking about earlier. Divide it, understand the Constitution, make them know that you know what the Constitution is about. A lot of them don't even know. I mean, even Republicans. You ask them pointed questions about the Constitution, they can't tell you. So the interest of the man must be connected with the constitutional rights of the place. Now, the Constitution does not give us rights. Our Creator, our God, gave us rights. The Constitution is to guarantee them and protect those rights from anything else. And that's what he's talking about here. James Madison. Then Mr. Voigt goes further. Think of Marbury versus Madison, where Chief Justice John Marshall sided with the new president, Thomas Jefferson, of a different party, by saying Secretary of State James Madison didn't have to deliver Marbury's commission after all. Why didn't he just order Madison to deliver the commission? Because he was afraid Jefferson would order him not to and show the Supreme Court to be toothless. Marshall's revenge was to articulate the beginnings of the Supreme Court's authority of judicial review. But it was Jefferson who gave us a glimpse of the posture that prevents encroaching powers. The right needs to throw off the precedents and legal paradigms that have wrongly developed over the last 200 years and to study carefully the words of the Constitution and how the founders would have responded in modern situations to the encroachments of other branches. Originalism should not be just interpreting the words in their original meaning. It should be to understand the logic of the original Constitution and how these authorities should be used unencumbered by the scar tissue resulting from decades of bad cases and bad statesmen. Now, he says the right. I wished he would have said, we the people need to throw off these presidents. And this is what I'm talking about. What are the principles and values in the Constitution? You want to really understand them? Get the book 5,000 Year Leap by Skousen. 5,000 Year Leap. It talks about how the founding fathers, what their thinking was, what their principles were, and values, and putting together the Constitution. Study the founding fathers. They studied history. They studied Cicero and Plato and Aristotle and Montesquieu. They studied history. They lived in tyranny. They understood tyranny. They understood human nature. So when they put this inspired document together, being guided by our Creator, it was to benefit all mankind, not just Americans, all mankind. And that's trying to be destroyed by the democratic Marxists, not only in our country, but around the world. Continuing with Mr. Voigt. This is just a great devolving power. The Center for Renewing America is trying to secure the southern border, which the Biden administration refuses to do. Not only do they refuse to do it, they do not even want to acknowledge there's a problem there. Back to the article. Knowing that the Biden administration is in office for 2 more years, we have looked to the Constitution for what the founders would do if one was a current governor of a border state. And lo and behold, we found Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3, articulating that states cannot engage in war making unless invaded. And in our research, we found that they did not mean threats from foreign nation states, but rather smugglers, militias, Indian tribes, etc. We showed that millions of illegal aliens coming across and Mexican cartels holding operational control of the border constitute an invasion that allows regional governors to take steps to apprehend and return illegal aliens to the border without the federal government. My point in bringing this up is that you would be surprised at how hard it is to get conservative lawyers to see this for no other reason than its novelty. You see how he's brought this up, and so many people don't want to go fight the good fight. They've been educated wrong. They've been indoctrinated in the school systems. And so you bring up something about the Constitution. Oh, no, we don't need to do that. Continuing with Mr. Voigt. That is what has to change. This is where we need to be radical in discarding or rethinking the legal paradigms that have confined our ability to return to the original Constitution. And folks, that is what the Medlock Post radio show is all about. Bringing us back to the original Constitution and how it benefits us as individuals, as families, corporations, and a nation. And we will continue talking about this unless I get hauled away by armed SWAT teams. All right, back to Mr. Voigt. The death of Queen Elizabeth II has given us a vivid picture of where the left is trying to go. An executive and a monarch with massive historic grandeur and symbolism and no remaining authority. A parliament where a cabinet of MPs head the departments of state, staffed by career civil servants with purported peace. Now listen to this next part. The left in the U.S. doesn't want an energetic president with the power to bend the executive branch to the will of the American people. Let me read that again. Let this sink in. The left in the United States doesn't want an energetic president with the power to bend the executive branch to the will of the American people. They don't want a vibrant Congress where great questions are debated and decided in front of the American people and the trade-offs made there. They don't want empowered members. They want discouraged and bored backbenchers. They want all-encompassed career experts like Tony Fauci to wield power behind the curtains. Folks, that's a powerful summary of what is going on. But going back to an energetic president, isn't that what Donald Trump was? Didn't he come down the escalator and say, globalism will not take over America? When he said that, the war began, because we're trying to take over this country. Obama is a globalist. Clinton was a globalist. The Bushes, both Bushes, were globalists. Go listen to their talks. I've played Obama's talks. One united order. Surrender yourselves to the greater good, to the greater power. That's where their power lies, and being part of that globalistic thing. None dare call it conspiracy. Back to the article. And in America, the scary part is that this regime is now increasingly arrayed against the American people. It is both woke and weaponized. The national security state with organs like the FBI, NSA, and CIA are aligned against the American people who are outraged by this revolution they never assented to. Now let's talk about an article I saw the other day, and it was about the federal government is fining stock trading companies like over $1 billion. You know why they're being fined? Because traders for those countries were sending information, personal phones that were not encrypted. It was information about companies and financial information and stuff like that. And they're saying that's illegal. We're fining you X number of millions and billions of dollars. Now, when I saw that, my question was, how did the government know that was happening? Did they go out and get a search warrant for each person's personal cell phone so they could go through it and see what was going on? No. The NSA is listening to everything you do. They're listening to this show. They listen for keywords. That's why I got a cyber attack 2 weeks ago during the show. Over 300 attacks. My computer stopped it all. So you think about this over. This is Marxism, folks. They're coming out and say, you did this on your private cell phone. How did you know that? How did you know that? I'd be taking this to court so fast it wouldn't be funny. How did you know that? Where's your warrant to see what's on my cell phone or listen to my conversations? See? Back to the article. The FBI is investigating concerned parents attending open school board meetings as domestic terrorists. They're putting political opponents in jail. The NSA is surveilling the conversations of citizens. Therefore, the hour is late and time is of the essence to expose the charade and rally the country against it toward self-government once again, and seize every leverage point to arrest the damage. Now, arrest here means stop. Stop the damage. Let's talk about this for a minute. Surveilling the citizens. The hour is late and time is of the essence to expose this and rally the country against or toward self-government. When this country began, the founding fathers knew for them to be able to break away from England, they needed support. But not only did they need support, because the colonists felt that can we handle freedom? Can we do this and do it right? It took the founding fathers and a bunch of other people 3 years, from 1773 to 1776, to work to help the colonists understand that and develop a public or a personal virtue and morality worthy of controlling freedom. And that, in turn, created a public I lost my word. Virtuous. A virtuous public. So individual, it starts with individual. Starts with the family. Then it builds into society. The founding fathers, 3 years to get the colonists to realize we're ready to break away from England and be free. And we can handle it. We can do this. So let me ask the question. Let me ask this question. Are people in the United States afraid to be free? Are they? And you say, Richard, why are you asking that question? Well, think about it. We have generations of people in this country, and don't start thinking I'm just referring to one group. Everybody across the board has been on welfare. We have people that have been on welfare that know nothing else but total dependence on the United States government. And the left wants it that way. They want more and more people dependent upon them. That's called Marxism. Now, we've heard stories through, for years that kids are living with their parents till they're 25, 26, whatever years old, and they don't leave. They've not been educated. They can't get a good job. We've got these people coming out of universities with gender studies degrees, and they can't go anywhere except go flip burgers or something. They can't even go teach with that degree. And they go back to dependency upon the government. All these student loan people that are applying to get their student loans paid off, you said, are people in America afraid to be free? They don't want to leave that comfort zone of the government taking care of them. They don't want to go out and take responsibility for their own life. Those of us that have taken that responsibility for ourselves and our families and our jobs are paying for them. So start asking yourselves these questions. Ask this of the left. Are you afraid to be free? Are you afraid to think on your own? Are you afraid of the media. Our Republican politicians are. They're scared to death of the media. They should be over that. The media is going to go after them no matter what. But we have people in this country, I think, are afraid to be free. Back to the article. The good news is that it's not too late. We have 75 million voting citizens and more each day, and that number is growing, I can promise you. We have nearly 30 Republican governors where red state sanctuaries can be created. We are on the cusp of Republican majorities in the House and Senate. We have institutions like the Center for Renewing America fighting every day to break the political cartels while providing an arc for those exercising courageous leadership. And we have the reality revealed by the left's fight against Donald Trump and his movement. They know it is an existential threat to their regime. Remember, they said Donald Trump and his movement. It is a movement, and it's growing and growing. And before long, you're going to have Hurricane MAGA out there running over the leftists. And it might be in November, running over these Marxists. So Hurricane MAGA, it's a tropical storm now, but it's building. And it's going to turn into Hurricane MAGA before you know it. Continuing with the article. If it wasn't a threat, they would not care. And the lengths they are going to, even now, shows we have some remaining time. Soak this in, folks. His final paragraph. The long, difficult road ahead of returning to our beloved Constitution starts with being honest with ourselves. It starts by recognizing that we are living in a post-constitutional time. Our need is not just to win congressional majorities that blame the other side or fill seats on court benches to meddle at the margins. It is to cast ourselves as dissidents of the current regime and to put on our shoulders the full weight of envisioning, articulating, and defending what a radical constitutionalism requires in the late hour that our country finds itself in, and then to do it. That and only that will be how America's statesmanship will be defined in the years ahead. Amen, Russell Voigt. And I said this before. Something came up. I was talking about a poll. 75% of the people said the country's headed in the wrong direction, and 67% were blaming Biden and his administration. And I says, then get up and do something about it. And this is what Russell Voigt is talking about. Now is the time to get up and be a radical constitutionalist. That's what our founding fathers were. They were radical. They were looked on as radical. They were told, you better not do this. Oh, no. It'll cost us. Now, Russell Voigt is the president of the Center for Renewing America. He served as acting director, then as a 42nd director of the OMB, Office of Management Budget, for nearly two years during the Trump administration. I'm going to try my best to get Mr. Voigt on this program. Can you imagine that interview? Yeah. I'm going to try my best to get him on this program. Folks, that this is important information, and we're going to, like I said, this is our educational role here. Let's be radical constitutionalists. Go back to the original constitutions, understand it, study it, know its principles and values, and let's go after it. All right. Let me get into a couple of more things here. I'm not going to mess with any music or anything today, but let me get into some Hurricane Ian stuff. If you've been watching the news, the Democrats are blaming climate change for Hurricane Ian, and that they're at odds with science, experts say. Okay, this is from the article. What they're trying to do is politicize the pain and suffering of these people to promote their green agenda. Gregory Wrightstone, the executive director of the climate policy think tank CO2 Coalition. He continues, well, their policies and their agenda to promote renewables will do far greater economic destruction to this country and Florida. And we've talked about that. We talked about it the other day. Over the last several days, media outlets, including New York Times, Associated Press, Politico, NPR, and Axios, all liberal propaganda clones, have published news stories reporting that climate change is to blame for Hurricane Ian and the storm's rapid intensification. A Time magazine article said, the science is well known that climate change created the conditions for Hurricane Ian. Okay, Time magazine, show us the science. Don't just say science is well known. This is what Russell Voigt was talking about. Be radical constitutionalist. Be radical. Show us the science, Time magazine. Don't just say it. In addition, Senator Amy Klobuchar, Democrat Minnesota, appeared to suggest that Americans need to vote for Democrats to avoid future hurricanes during an interview. It wasn't just appeared to suggest. She came out 2 or 3 days in a row, you need to vote Democrat in November, and we can stop hurricanes. Wow. And the others, another representative, Democrat from Illinois, tweeted Thursday, the rapid storm intensification we're seeing with Hurricane Ian will become more common and more dangerous as the climate changes. They don't know what they're talking about, folks. And Amy Klobuchar went on to say, we just did something about climate change for the first time in decades. That's why we have to win this as a hurricane bears down on Florida. We have to win in the midterms. What she's talking about is this Inflation Reduction Act, which pumps $1 trillion into green energy. Will do nothing except make rich people richer. We talked about this in episode 59. I went through it in detail. Go back and listen. However, Wrightstone and the other experts contacted by Fox News Digital rejected those arguments, arguing that individual storms cannot be linked change. Quote, if you read the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, says on hurricanes, there's just not enough data. And this goes along with the Italian scientists I reported last week that studied this and all the information and came out and says no evidence of change. Everything's basically the same temperatures, precipitation amounts, etc., etc. They're all about the same. Continuing, there's nothing to back up what they're saying. There were about 16 major hurricanes between 1916 and 1965, but only 6 since 1965. So clearly major hurricanes happen with lower levels of carbon dioxide. That doesn't add up for them. Doesn't add up, folks. Their science is hocus pocus. Skipping down here, Tom Knudsen of the NOAA said, it was premature to conclude with high confidence that human-caused increasing greenhouse gases have had any impact on hurricane activity in the Atlantic. Now, folks, the greenhouse gases are basically about the same. Now, you know that Bill Gates, the multi-billionaire who's an eco-terrorist, is spending billions of dollars to go out and spread a shadow cloud around the earth to block the sunshine to the earth. He wants to block it. What is that going to do? What if that really lowered temperatures? Then that's man-made climate crisis. That is as stupid as you can get. Jamie Rome, acting director of the National Hurricane Center, echoed the same findings in an interview on CNN, pushing back against anchor Don Lemon's argument that Hurricane Ian's intensification is tied to climate change. Rome said he would caution against linking any one storm to climate change. I saw that interview. This guy just ate up Don Lemon. Rome goes on and says, trying to blame global warming on Hurricane Ian not only defies scientific evidence, the clear weight of scientific evidence, but it is despicable, politicizing a real tragedy that requires our attention and focus on the people negatively affected. And then James Taylor, the president of conservative think tank Heartland Institute, says these types of hurricanes existed before SUVs and coal-fired power plants were invented. In fact, they were much more frequent and severe before coal power plants and SUVs. So you see, folks, we're going to keep hammering this too. And you can call me a climate crisis denier, whatever you want. There is no climate crisis. Let me ask you this. How does paying more tax on a gallon of gasoline, more tax on pulling a barrel of oil out of the earth, more tax and regulations on energy consumption or energy production stop climate crisis? It doesn't. They just want your money so they can have more power. Period. Now, Thomas Sowell, great thinker, great mind, said this: emotions neither prove nor disprove facts. There was a time when any rational adult understood this. But years of dumbed-down education and emphasis on how people feel have left too many people unable to see through its media gimmick, unquote. Not only that, it has left too many people unable to think. They don't teach you how to think in school. Critical thinking is being lost. We need to bring it back. Ask questions. Never be afraid to ask questions. And if you start asking tough questions, they're just going to call you names and all that stuff because they don't know the answers. They don't. Let me close today with this little story that ties in a little bit to Thomas Sowell's quote here. I've turning pages here, folks. I'm getting there. The donkey told the tiger, the grass is blue. The tiger replied, no, the grass is green. The discussion became heated. They decided to submit the issue to arbitration, so they approached the lion. As they approached the lion on his throne, the donkey started screaming, Your Highness, isn't it true that the grass is blue? The lion replied, If you believe it is true, the grass is blue. The donkey rushed forward and continued, The tiger disagrees with me, contradicts me, and annoys me. Please punish him. The king then declared, The tiger will be punished for 3 days of silence. The donkey jumped with joy and went on his way, content and repeating, The grass is blue, the grass is blue. The tiger asked the lion, Your Majesty, why have you punished me? After all, the grass is green. The lion replied, you've known and seen the grass is green. The tiger asked, so why do you punish me? The lion replied, that has nothing to do with the question of whether the grass is blue or green. The punishment is because it is degrading. The punishment is because it is degrading for a brave, intelligent creature like you to waste time arguing with an ass. And on top of that, you came and bothered me with that question just to validate something you already knew was true. The biggest waste of time is arguing with the fool and fanatic who doesn't care about truth or reality, but only the victory of his beliefs and illusions. Never waste time on discussions that make no sense. There are people who, for all the evidence presented to them, do not have the ability to understand. Others who are blinded by ego, hatred, and resentment, and the only thing that they want is to be right even if they aren't. When ignorance screams, intelligence moves on. Of that story. And so we've come to the close, except we have one more quote to get into. The sounds of the Patriots is playing in the background to let us know our time is up. Jefferson Smith said, quote, the great principles don't get lost once they come to light. They're right here. You just have to see them again, unquote. From Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. This is the character played by Jimmy Stewart. And that, folks, is the Medlock Post radio show for today. May God bless America, may God bless you, and may God bless those that have been impacted by Hurricane Ian. Thank you and have a great day. We'll see you next episode.